Let me describe a couple to you, and I want you to slow down and really imagine them. Because this isn't some extreme case. This is normal. This is average. This is everywhere. She works in marketing, earns around $62,000 a year. He works in it, makes about $71,000. Together, they bring in roughly $133,000. On paper, they are doing well. Better than most people. Actually, statistically, they're in the top quarter of households. They are exactly where the system says you're supposed to end up if you do things right. And yet, they feel constantly uneasy. Not poor in the dramatic sense, but fragile. They don't feel secure. They have savings, but not the kind that lets you sleep peacefully. Maybe 1 month of expenses, maybe 2 if they stretch it. Enough to survive a minor hiccup. Not enough to survive a real problem. When their car needed a major repair, they didn't reach for savings. They reached for a credit card, and that moment lingered in their minds longer than the repair itself. They both work full-time, often more than full-time. Their days are long, their evenings are short, and their energy is always running on empty. Most weekdays, they don't really talk. They exchange updates. Who's picking up groceries? Who's paying which bill? Who's too tired to cook? The weekends are spent catching up on chores rather than resting. Life feels like an endless loop of work recovery and preparation for more work. What makes this especially confusing is that they followed the plan exactly. They went to school. They got degrees. They built careers. They waited before getting married. They combined their finances responsibly. They bought a house in a decent area. They didn't do anything reckless. They didn't ignore advice. They did what they were told would lead to stability. And yet, stability feels permanently out of reach. At some point, a quiet thought starts forming in the back of their minds. It's not dramatic. It's almost shameful, like something you're not supposed to think. We make too much money to feel this stressed. That thought doesn't mean they think they're entitled to luxury. It means they expected breathing room. They expected the constant pressure to ease at some point. And it never did. This is where a lot of people turn inward and assume they must be doing something wrong. Maybe they're bad at budgeting. Maybe they lack discipline. Maybe they didn't optimize their spending enough. But that explanation doesn't fully add up, because millions of households with similar incomes feel the exact same way. When a problem is this widespread, it stops being a personal failure and starts looking like a structural one. We've all been taught the same story. 2 incomes are better than 1. It sounds obvious. It sounds empowering. It sounds like progress. If one person could support a family decades ago, then 2 people earning similar wages should be thriving. More income should mean more security, more freedom, more options. That's what simple math suggests. But what actually happened wasn't increased security. It was increased dependency. The second income didn't become extra. It became necessary. And that difference is everything. The idea of the 2-income trap was first articulated by Elizabeth Warren. Before she was a public figure, she was studying bankruptcy cases, not theorizing from an ivory tower. She looked at thousands of families who had collapsed financially, and she noticed something deeply counterintuitive. The families with 2 incomes weren't safer. They were more exposed. They were more likely to fall apart when something went wrong. To understand why, you have to go back to how middle-class life used to be structured. In the single-income era, families built their lives around what one income could sustain. Housing, transportation, food, and basic healthcare were sized to one paycheck. That meant there was slack in the system. If something went wrong, there was a second option. Not an ideal one, but an option. The non-working spouse could enter the workforce. That potential income was a buffer, not a requirement. Over time, that buffer disappeared. As more households added a second income, prices adjusted upward. Not because anyone planned it, but because markets respond to purchasing power. When millions of families can suddenly afford more house prices rise. When everyone can bid more for the same neighborhoods and school districts, those areas become more expensive. 2 incomes didn't make housing better. They made housing more competitive. Eventually, the second income stopped being optional. It became the price of admission. Families weren't using two incomes to get ahead. They were using two incomes just to stand still. The backup plan was no longer in reserve. It was fully deployed, just to maintain normal life. The second income also isn't as valuable as it looks. Gross numbers are deceptive. The second paycheck is taxed at higher marginal rates. It often triggers childcare costs that didn't exist before. It requires additional commuting, additional vehicles, additional convenience spending to compensate for exhaustion. Each of these costs seems reasonable on its own, but together they quietly consume most of that income. What's left isn't freedom, it's obligation. And psychologically, this is devastating, because people don't make decisions based on net income. They make decisions based on what they think they earn. Banks approve mortgages based on combined income, not combined resilience. Families buy homes sized for two paychecks. They take on fixed costs that only work if nothing ever goes wrong. And something always goes wrong. A layoff, a health issue, burnout, a child who needs extra care, a parent who can no longer live independently. When that happens, the family doesn't just lose income, they lose structural stability. Expenses don't shrink when income disappears. They remain fixed, and that's when panic sets in. This is why so many middle-class households live with constant low-grade anxiety. Even when everything is technically fine, they know it's fragile. They sense that the entire system depends on continuous performance from both adults, indefinitely. That knowledge is exhausting. It turns work into survival rather than progress. The tragedy is that this trap isn't driven by luxury. It's driven by basics: housing, childcare, healthcare, education. These aren't indulgences. They're requirements for participating in modern middle-class life. And when those costs are structured around two incomes, the household loses flexibility. The alternative isn't easy, but it's simple. Real security doesn't come from maximizing income. It comes from preserving margin. Families that escape this trap don't build their lives around what two incomes can support. They build around what one income can carry, and they treat the second income as temporary. That mindset changes everything. Expenses stop expanding automatically. Choices slow down. Trade-offs become intentional. Over time, savings grow not because of extreme frugality, but because income is no longer fully. Investments begin to create their own momentum, and with that momentum comes something most people mistake for wealth: options. The middle-class money trap isn't about working harder or smarter. It's about understanding that resilience was quietly traded for appearances. Bigger houses, better neighborhoods, higher price tags disguised as progress. But progress without flexibility is just pressure. Two incomes aren't the problem. Two incomes that are already spent before they arrive are. And once you see that, it becomes impossible to unsee.